It appeared to be a routine parking violation, but it was a calculated setup. Two officers believed they could humiliate a black woman, cuff her in public, and silence her. What they didn't realize was that she wasn't just any woman. Denise Holloway, a retired military attorney and federal investigator, was the one person who could unravel their entire scheme. What began as an abuse of power spiraled into a full-scale reckoning, exposing deep-rooted corruption, rallying a community, and sparking a movement. The twists. Even Denise couldn't have foreseen how far this would go. Stay with us. You won't believe how it ends. Before we dive in, let us know what time you're watching and where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment. We'd love to hear from you. It was supposed to be an ordinary afternoon. The sun shone bright but gentle, casting long shadows across the town plaza. Denise Holloway pulled her black SUV into a loading zone outside the neighborhood pharmacy. She glanced at her watch. 2:15. She had just enough time to help her friend, Mrs. Alice Brenner, pick up her prescription. Alice waited on the sidewalk, 82 years old, her white hair like fresh snow, seated in a sturdy wheelchair. Denise hopped out, flashing a warm smile, and wheeled Alice carefully toward the automatic doors. "I appreciate this so much, Denise," Alice said, her voice thin but grateful. "You didn't have to." "I told you," Denise replied with a smile. "Your family." She'd only be inside for 5 minutes, maybe less. The loading zone was empty, no trucks, no hazards. But trouble was already watching. Across the lot, 2 patrol officers sat in their cruiser. Officer Brad Cutler, 46, stocky, pale, with a receding hairline and a permanent scowl he wore like a badge of honor, sat beside Officer Kyle Brewer, 29, gripping the wheel. Fresh out of the academy, Brewer already looked like he regretted becoming a cop. Cutler watched Denise like a hawk eyeing prey. "Another one thinking she's above the rules," he muttered. Brewer hesitated. "She's helping that elderly lady, just parked for a second." "Doesn't matter," Cutler snapped. "You let them slide once, they think they own the place." Without another word, Cutler flung the door open. Brewer sighed, then followed. Denise had just stepped back outside, an empty prescription bag. In one hand, the other resting lightly on Alice's shoulder. She saw the 2 officers approaching, their pace brisk, their expressions hard. "Ma'am," Cutler barked, "you're illegally parked in a fire zone." Denise blinked. "It's a loading area. There's no sign saying fire zone." Cutler pointed at a faded red curb, barely visible beneath weathered paint. "It's designated. Step away from the vehicle." Denise steadied her breath. "Officer, I'll move the car. I was just assisting my elderly friend." "License and registration," Cutler cut her off. His eyes weren't scanning the scene, they were scanning her, measuring, judging. Brewer shifted uneasily behind him. "Maybe just let her move the car, sir," he suggested. Cutler ignored him. "License and registration. Now." Denise reached calmly into her purse, her movements deliberate, controlled. Her years in the military had taught her how quickly misunderstandings could escalate, especially when you looked like her. She handed over the documents without a word. Cutler snatched them. Brewer ran the plates and license through his tablet. "All clear. Registered to Denise Holloway. No violations," he reported. Cutler grunted. "Doesn't mean she's clean." Denise felt her stomach tighten, not from fear but from something heavier. Disappointment. "I'm willing to move my car immediately," she said. "There's no need for this." "You don't decide what there's a need for," Cutler sneered, leaning closer, his voice low. "People like you always think you can bend the rules." "People like you." The phrase stung, not because it was unexpected, but because it was so predictable. Alice's frail voice broke the tension. "Officer, please. This woman is just helping me. She's done nothing wrong." Cutler rounded on her. "Stay out of this, ma'am." Brewer's eyes darted between Cutler and Denise. "Sir, maybe a warning would be appropriate." "No," Cutler snapped. "She's obstructing." She refused to comply. "I didn't refuse anything," Denise said sharply. "I complied, fully." Cutler's hand moved to his belt. Turn around, hands behind your back. The words hit like a hammer. The small crowd gathering nearby gasped. Shoppers paused, grocery bags in hand. A couple pulled out their phones. Alice gripped Denise's hand. "No, this is outrageous." "Officer Cutler," Denise began, her voice steady. "This is unnecessary escalation. I am not resisting." But Cutler wasn't listening. He wasn't interested in de-escalation. Brewer hesitated, his hand hovering near his own cuffs, his face pale. "Sir," he said. Cutler growled, "Do it." Brewer swallowed hard, stepped behind Denise, and his cuffs clicked open. Denise exhaled slowly, not resisting as Brewer gently took her wrists. The cold steel closed around them with a finality that chilled more than her skin. "I'm so sorry," Brewer whispered. Denise said nothing, locking eyes with Cutler instead. Her gaze was calm, controlled, unbroken. Cutler didn't like that. Not one bit. "To the squad car," he ordered. "She's going downtown." By now, at least a dozen people had gathered, phones up, recording. A young man in a baseball cap stepped forward. "Hey, what's she even being arrested for?" "Obstruction," Cutler barked. The man frowned. "She didn't obstruct anything. We saw the whole thing." "Keep walking," Cutler warned, but the crowd didn't move. Someone muttered, "This isn't right." Another said, "She helped that old lady, for God's sake." Denise felt the weight of every eye on her. Not just the bystanders, but the silent watchers. The people who knew what was happening, but were waiting to see how far it would go, and it would go far because Cutler needed it to. He leaned close to Brewer as they approached the patrol car. "Run her again. See if she's got any priors. Maybe something will stick." Brewer hesitated. "We already checked. She's clean." "Check again." As Brewer unlocked the back door, a new voice cut through the air. "Do you even know who she is?" Cutler turned, eyes narrowing. It was the young man in the baseball cap looking furious. Cutler sneered, "I don't care if she's the Queen of England." But Brewer froze, the color draining from his face because he did know, and suddenly, Cutler's little plan wasn't looking so clever anymore. Brewer stood frozen, his hand still on the patrol car door. His heart pounded louder than the murmurs of the crowd. Cutler didn't notice, too busy puffing up his chest, feeding off the power trip. "Put her inside, Brewer. Don't make me tell you twice." Brewer's mouth was dry. He glanced back at Denise, her calm eyes locked on his. There was no fear in them, only patience. A patience that said, "I know exactly how this will end." "You don't." Brewer leaned in, his voice low. "Ma'am, please just step into the car. I'm trying to avoid making this worse." Denise nodded once. "I'm not resisting." The crowd stirred. A woman whispered to her husband, "They have no right to treat her like that." Another man raised his phone higher, recording every second. Cutler barked at the bystanders, "Everyone back up unless you want to spend the night in jail, too." But no one moved. Brewer opened the door, and Denise ducked gracefully into the back seat, her wrists still cuffed, but her dignity untouched. She sat upright, chin high. As Brewer shut the door, he couldn't help but notice the man in the baseball cap still watching, still recording. His expression wasn't just angry anymore. It was determined. Cutler stomped toward the cruisers. "Computer terminal. I want her full record. Any priors, unpaid tickets, anything." Brewer followed reluctantly. "Sir, we already ran her twice. She's clean." Cutler gritted his teeth. "Nobody's that clean." Brewer hesitated. "She's military." Cutler froze. "What?" "Her plates. That insignia on her keychain." Brewer pointed through the window. "I didn't notice at first. She's a veteran." Cutler's face darkened. "So what? That doesn't give her a free pass." Brewer lowered his voice. "Sir, maybe we should just write the citation and release her." Cutler jabbed a finger at Brewer's chest. "This is why rookies like you get walked on. She was insubordinate, obstructive, and she's making a scene to embarrass this department." Brewer bit his lip. "The only person making a scene is you." Cutler's eyes flared. Watch yourself. Behind them, the young man in the cap stepped closer to the crowd. Everybody, keep filming. Don't stop recording. Brewer's stomach tightened. This wasn't going away quietly. Suddenly, Brewer's radio crackled. Dispatch Unit 2 to 14. We have a report of a disturbance at your location. Multiple civilian calls coming in. Cutler snatched the radio. Dispatch, situation under control. The dispatcher paused. Copy, but we've also been notified that a supervising officer is en route. Brewer frowned. We didn't request a supervisor. Cutler cursed under his breath. Someone's pulling strings. Brewer looked back at the cruiser. Denise sat calmly, too calmly, like she knew exactly what strings had just been pulled. Cutler leaned into Brewer's ear. Go back to the car. Check her phone if you can. Maybe she recorded us. Brewer recoiled. That's illegal. We need probable cause and a warrant. Cutler glared. She's not gonna sue if we find something first. Brewer shook his head. I won't. You will. That's an order. Brewer turned toward the patrol car, his chest tight. Every step felt heavier than the last. Denise watched him approach through the window. Brewer opened the door carefully. Ma'am, I was told to... Before he could finish, a sharp voice rang out across the parking lot. Step away from that vehicle. Both officers turned. A tall man strode toward them. Crisp black slacks, a blue button-down shirt, no tie, but there was no mistaking the authority in his walk or the badge he held up. Colonel James Holloway, he announced. Cutler squared his shoulders. This is a police matter, sir. Step back. James didn't break stride. You've detained my wife. Brewer's eyes widened. Wife. Cutler's lip curled. If you have a complaint, you can file it at the station. We're handling a suspect here. James stopped 3 feet away, his gaze sweeping from Brewer to Cutler, calm, cold, calculated. You've made a grave mistake. Cutler rolled his eyes. Save the theatrics. She's obstructing an investigation. James chuckled softly. Obstructing? By helping a disabled senior into a pharmacy. Brewer looked at the ground. Cutler blustered. She parked illegally and became combative when approached. James, tone sharpened. I've reviewed the footage. Cutler's face paled slightly. What footage? James pointed at the young man in the cap. That footage. And the dozen others recording you right now. Brewer felt his pulse spike. He hadn't realized how many cameras were pointed their way. James pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. And now it's already uploaded to the cloud. So even if someone, his eyes flicked to Cutler, decided to delete a phone or a body cam, it's too late. Cutler took a step back. You're interfering with law enforcement. James' expression didn't change. And you're interfering with a federal investigation. Brewer's breath caught. Federal. Cutler blustered again. What investigation? James smiled thinly. You'll find out soon enough. He turned to Brewer. Son, I suggest you make the right choice today. It might be the only thing that saves your career. Brewer's mind raced. His instincts screamed to get out while he still could. Cutler snapped. Get in the car. We're taking her in now. James spoke quietly, but firmly. No, you're not. Cutler lunged forward. Don't tell me how to... Before he could finish, the deep growl of engines echoed across the lot. 2 large black SUVs rounded the corner and rolled to a stop beside the scene. Their windows were tinted dark. The doors opened in unison. 6 figures emerged, suits, badges, no local jurisdiction. Federal. The entire crowd fell silent. Even the air seemed to pause. Cutler's mouth opened, but no words came out. Brewer took an involuntary step back. He knew they were here for them, and the situation had just exploded far beyond a simple parking violation. Denise, still seated calmly in the back of the cruiser, smiled faintly. The real game had just begun. The moment those federal agents stepped out of the SUVs, the entire parking lot seemed to freeze in time. The shoppers, the onlookers with their phones, Even the breeze itself held still. 6 agents in dark suits, their faces calm and unreadable, carried the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to shout. Cutler squared his shoulders, trying to puff himself up like he had any power left to wield. "This is local jurisdiction. You've got no authority here." One of the agents, a tall black woman with short-cropped hair and mirrored sunglasses, held up a badge. "Special Agent Carter, Department of Justice." "You're wrong, Officer Cutler. We have full jurisdiction. Step away from the vehicle." Cutler's face flushed deep red, his fists clenched at his sides. She was resisting arrest. She obstructed. "You have that on record?" Carter asked coolly. Cutler hesitated. We have body cams." Brewer shifted uncomfortably. He knew what that meant. The cams were rolling, sure, but Cutler had a nasty habit of shutting his off when things got ugly, and this was about as ugly as it could get. Carter nodded once to her team. "Retrieve the woman." Before Cutler could protest, 2 agents moved past him like he wasn't even there. Brewer stepped aside, his breath shallow. The taller agent opened the patrol car door while the other carefully supported Denise as she stepped out. The cuffs were still tight around her wrists. Carter frowned. "Get those off her now." Brewer didn't wait for Cutler's order. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled the key from his belt and unlocked the cuffs. The steel clicked free, and Denise rolled her wrists, gently flexing the circulation back. "Thank you," she said softly. But her eyes weren't on Brewer. They were locked on Cutler, calm, steady, and far too confident for someone who'd just been dragged out of a police cruiser. Cutler tried again. "This is a misunderstanding. She parked illegally. She got confrontational. We followed protocol." James Holloway's voice cut through the tension. "Protocol? You call racial profiling and unlawful detention protocol?" The crowd murmured, phones still raised, streaming, recording, every word echoing beyond the parking lot. Carter didn't blink. "Your actions today didn't just violate department policy, Officer Cutler. They violated federal civil rights, statutes." She pulled a sealed envelope from her briefcase and held it out. "And as of this moment, you're officially under investigation." Cutler snatched the envelope, his eyes darting wildly across the papers inside. His face turned a shade paler with every line he read. This is a setup. She provoked this." Brewer swallowed hard. Even he couldn't believe how quickly things had unraveled. Denise folded her arms calmly. "I asked to move my vehicle. You refused. I provided my license and registration. You chose to escalate. I remained compliant. You chose to humiliate me." Brewer felt the truth of those words like a weight in his chest. He hadn't stood up. He hadn't stopped it, and now the whole world would see. Cutler jabbed a finger toward Brewer. "He can back me up. Tell them she resisted." Brewer opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His gaze dropped to the asphalt. James Holloway spoke quietly to Carter. "There's more. Officer Cutler's history isn't exactly clean." Carter nodded. "We know. His file has been reviewed for months. Excessive force complaints, racial bias reports, most dismissed internally." Cutler snapped. "You can't hold dismissed complaints against me." "Oh," Carter replied smoothly. "We can. Especially when there's a pattern, and especially when those dismissals involved questionable supervisors." Brewer flinched. He knew exactly who those supervisors were. James stepped forward, his posture as straight as the day he'd left active duty. "You targeted my wife because of her skin color. You used your badge as a weapon, and you thought no one would stop you." Cutler sneered. "This is political. You people just want to make an example out of me." "No," Carter said, shaking her head slowly. "You made an example out of yourself." The crowd grew louder now, voices rising, not in anger, but in support. "Justice for Denise!" someone shouted. "Enough is enough!" another cried. Cutler's jaw clenched so tight Brewer thought his teeth might crack. Agent Carter turned to Brewer. "Officer Brewer, you have a decision to make right now. Brewer's breath caught. Ma'am, you can either stand with your partner, whose actions will likely lead to federal charges, or you can tell us what really happened. Cooperate, and it might just save your badge and your freedom. Cutler growled. Don't you say a word. Brewer looked between Carter, Denise, and Cutler. His stomach twisted, his mind raced. He thought about his training, about what the academy had drilled into him. Serve and protect. Uphold the law. The law wasn't just a weapon for those with power. It was a shield for the powerless. His voice came out hoarse. I'll cooperate. Cutler's head snapped toward him like a viper. You coward. Brewer stepped back. You crossed the line, sir, and you dragged me with you. I won't sink any deeper. The crowd erupted, in applause. Not a loud cheer, but a steady, powerful wave of approval, a sound that made Cutler shrink even as he tried to puff himself up again. James placed a reassuring hand on Denise's shoulder. It's over. But Denise shook her head slightly. No, it's just beginning. Carter nodded in agreement. Officer Cutler, you are officially relieved of duty pending the outcome of this investigation. You'll surrender your badge and weapon now. Cutler's hand hovered near his holster, rage boiling in his eyes. But then he saw the agent's hands drifting toward their own weapons. His bluff was over. Brewer reached out slowly. Your badge, sir. For a long, painful moment, Cutler didn't move. Then, with a trembling hand, he unclipped his badge and slammed it into Brewer's palm. The crowd watched silently as Cutler stood there, once the predator, now exposed and powerless. James leaned in close, his voice low. You thought you knew who she was, but you never even scratched the surface. Cutler didn't respond. His eyes darted around the lot, searching for some kind of rescue, some lifeline, but none came. Denise straightened her shoulders. You see, Officer Cutler, this isn't just about me. It's about every person you've ever silenced, every complaint you buried, every life you tried to ruin, and now the spotlight's finally on you. Agent Carter gestured to her team. Let's proceed. As the agents surrounded Cutler, Brewer let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The young man in the baseball cap gave him a small nod of respect. Brewer nodded back. It wasn't redemption, not yet. But maybe it was the first step. And somewhere deep down, he knew the real reckoning was only just beginning. The crowd was silent again, but this time it wasn't fear holding their voices back. It was anticipation. Every person standing in that parking lot could feel it. The weight of the moment. Justice wasn't just a word today. It was unfolding, right before their eyes. Cutler stood motionless as the federal agents flanked him. His face had drained of color, and for the first time the arrogant sneer he always wore had vanished. But Denise wasn't ready to let this end quietly. She stepped forward, her voice calm but clear. Before you walk him out of here, I have something to say. Agent Carter gave her a small nod. Go ahead. Cutler glared at her as if daring her to gloat. But that wasn't what Denise had in mind. She turned to the bystanders, to the people who had filmed, who had refused to look away. Today, I didn't just stand up for myself. I stood up for everyone who's ever been humiliated, mistreated, or silenced by someone abusing a badge. What happened to me today wasn't new. It's happened to countless people before me, people without cameras, without witnesses, without a voice. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones tilted upward. They weren't just recording anymore. They were bearing witness. Cutler scoffed. Spare me the speech. Denise ignored him. She turned to Brewer. Officer Brewer, you made the right choice just now. But you need to know that choice has to be made every day, not just when federal agents show up. When you wear that uniform, it can either protect the community or protect corruption. You can't do both. Brewer nodded slowly, his face flushed with shame and relief all at once. Yes, ma'am. Cutler shifted uncomfortably, his wrists now cuffed, the same steel he had so casually locked around Denise's minutes earlier. James stepped forward, beside his wife. You called her obstructive. You tried to portray her as a criminal, but everyone here saw the truth, and so will the rest of the country. Agent Carter signaled to two agents. Take him. As they moved to escort Cutler toward the SUVs, he suddenly twisted his neck toward Brewer. "You're finished. You think this will save you? You'll be out on the street before the month's over." Brewer didn't flinch. "If speaking, the truth cost me this job, so be it. I'd rather be honest without a badge than corrupt with one." The crowd responded with soft applause. But just as the agents moved Cutler toward the vehicle, a voice from the crowd shouted, "Wait!" All heads turned. It was the young man in the baseball cap again, the same one who had started recording from the beginning. He stepped forward, holding up his phone. "There's something else you all need to see." Agent Carter paused. "What is it?" The young man turned his phone screen toward the agents, Denise, and the crowd. "I caught the whole arrest on video, but not just today. 2 weeks ago, I filmed this same officer roughing up a black teenager near the gas station down the block. That kid didn't resist. Cutler slammed him into a squad car for jaywalking. I didn't know what to do with the footage until now." Brewer's eyes widened. "I remember that call. Cutler told me the kid ran." The young man shook his head. "He didn't. Cutler lied." The crowd gasped. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Agent Carter took the phone, forwarding the video to her team. Within seconds, the agents had the footage playing on a tablet. The video was shaky but clear. Cutler grabbing a slender black teenager no older than 16. The boy's hands were up. He wasn't resisting. Yet Cutler shoved him into the cruiser so hard, the young man's head bounced off the metal frame. "Agent," Carter's jaw tightened. "Thank you for coming forward." Cutler started to protest, but Carter cut him off. "Save it. You've just added a new civil rights violation to your charges, and this time there's no internal affairs cover-up. This is federal." Denise turned to the young man. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied. "Marcus Bennett." "Marcus," Denise said, "you did what so many people are too afraid to do. You spoke up. You recorded the truth. You made sure the system couldn't ignore this." Marcus smiled shyly, "Just doing what was right." James nodded approvingly. "That's what makes change." Cutler sagged slightly in the agent's grip. For the first time, his power was completely gone, not just because of the badge he'd lost or the cuffs on his wrists, but because even the crowd he once intimidated was no longer afraid. As the agents led Cutler away, Denise addressed the bystanders once more. "Let this be a message, not just to officers like him, but to everyone watching. Abuse of power thrives in silence, but when we stand together, record, speak out, and demand accountability, it dies." The applause was louder this time, stronger. Brewer wiped at his eyes, swallowing a lump in his throat. "What happens now?" Agent Carter answered firmly. "Now we continue the investigation. We'll pull every body cam, every arrest report, and every internal affairs file linked to Officer Cutler. And if we find patterns of abuse, and I believe we will, he won't be the only one facing charges." James smiled faintly. "Good." Carter nodded toward Denise. "And your involvement today, it's not over either." Denise raised an eyebrow. "We'll need your statement and your assistance," Carter smiled. "Your background makes you uniquely qualified." The crowd leaned in, sensing something unspoken. Brewer frowned slightly. "Your background?" Denise met his eye. For a moment, the confidence in her eyes softened, but then she nodded. "I'm not just a military veteran. I'm currently serving as a consultant for the Federal Oversight Committee on Police Misconduct. My job is to expose exactly the kind of behavior we witnessed today." The revelation hit the crowd like a shockwave. Brewer let out a slow breath. "That's why you were so calm." Denise nodded. "I've seen men like Cutler before, and I'll see others after him. But every time someone like Marcus steps forward, every time an officer like you chooses the right side, we move closer to the kind of justice we all deserve." Marcus lifted his phone again. "The video's already online. It's going viral." James chuckled. "Good. Let the truth spread." As Cutler was loaded into the SUV, his head lowered in defeat, Denise looked out over the sea of faces. People who had gathered out of curiosity now stood united. Witnesses who had come to watch had become allies. And though the sun was beginning to sink behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the parking lot, a new light was rising. the light of accountability. And Denise knew this was just the beginning. As the black SUVs pulled away with Cutler inside, a hush settled over the parking lot. The crowd slowly began to disperse, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others exchanging hopeful glances. Phones were lowered, but conversations were just beginning. People knew they had witnessed something rare: accountability in real time. Denise stood beside James, her wrists now free but slightly bruised. She rubbed them absent-mindedly, not from pain, but to remind herself that the fight wasn't over. The cuffs were gone, but the deeper chains, abuse, prejudice, silence, still lingered for many others. Agent Carter approached. "We'll be in touch, Mrs. Holloway," Denise corrected her gently. "Colonel Holloway, retired." Carter smiled. "Of course, Colonel." Brewer lingered awkwardly nearby, his hat now in his hands, fingers twisting the brim. His youthful face looked older than it had that morning, wiser and heavier with the weight of his decision. Denise turned to him. "Officer Brewer." He straightened. "Yes, ma'am." "I know today wasn't easy. You spoke up when it mattered. That's rare." Brewer nodded, though shame still clouded his eyes. "I should have stopped him sooner. I knew what he was doing was wrong." James stepped in. "Most men don't stop at all. You did. That matters." Brewer swallowed hard. "I'd like to give my full statement about everything, not just today but other times when Cutler crossed lines, things I should have reported. Before." Agent Carter, overhearing, walked back over. "We'll take your statement at the federal office and, Officer Brewer," she paused, "your cooperation will be noted. It might save your career." Brewer exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and fear. "Thank you." Before anyone could say more, a sudden voice rose from the small remaining crowd. "Excuse me." It was an older woman, gray-haired, petite, leaning heavily on a cane. Alice, Denise's friend, the one she'd come to help. She had been silent through most of the ordeal, but now her eyes burned with determination. "I have something to say." Denise moved to steady her, but Alice waved her off. "No, I need to stand for this." The agents and bystanders grew quiet again. "I watched my friend," Alice began, her voice steady, "get treated like a criminal today for doing nothing but helping me. I may not look like it now, but I was around for the civil rights marches. I remember dogs and hoses. I remember faces full of hate, just like that man Cutler's. And I remember the faces of good people, black, white, young, old, who stood up to it." The wind stirred gently, tugging at Alice's scarf. "I'm standing up now because injustice isn't just a memory. It's alive. It wears a uniform sometimes, and we all have a choice: stay quiet or speak out." A ripple of agreement moved through the few bystanders still watching. Even Brewer looked visibly moved. Alice turned to Denise. "You didn't just stand for yourself today. You stood for me, for every person who's too old or too scared to push back." Denise squeezed, her hand gently. "We stood together." Just then Marcus approached, his phone now lowered. "The video's everywhere. News stations are picking it up. It's already got thousands of shares." James smiled. "Let them see it. Let them see what happens when good people refuse to back down." Agent Carter checked her phone, reading updates from her team. "It's moving faster than expected. Media's asking for statements. Community groups are already organizing." She looked directly at Denise. "They'll want a leader." Denise hesitated. She hadn't come here to lead a movement. She had come to help a friend, and had unknowingly become a symbol of something much larger. James placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You've always been a leader. You just didn't expect today to be the moment." Denise sighed, then nodded. "If they need me, I'll speak." Carter smiled approvingly. "Good, because this isn't over. Not even close." Brewer cleared his throat. "What happens to Cutler now?" Carter answered plainly. "He'll face federal charges, civil rights violations, abuse of power, possibly obstruction. And with Marcus's footage and others coming forward, he won't be able to dodge the consequences this time." Brewer looked at her. "And me?" Carter softened her tone. "That depends. you'll cooperate fully. And if you truly want to be the officer this community needs, you'll have to prove it every day moving forward." "I will," Brewer said firmly. Just then, another figure emerged from the dispersing crowd, an older black man, well-dressed, holding a worn leather briefcase. His eyes were sharp behind his glasses. "Colonel Holloway?" he asked. "Yes," Denise replied cautiously. "My name's Harold McCoy. I'm an attorney. I represent several families who've had complaints dismissed against Officer Cutler over the years." He paused. "Until now, no one listened. But after today, they're ready to try again." Denise nodded slowly. "Tell them I'll help however I can." Harold smiled. "We finally have what we need. Witnesses, evidence, and now the nation's attention." James looked at the horizon, where the sun was finally dipping low. And not just attention. Momentum. Denise took a deep breath. The weight of the day settled over her. Heavy, but empowering. She glanced at Marcus, at Alice, at Brewer, ordinary people who had chosen to act. And she thought of all the others who would watch the footage tonight. People who'd experienced injustice in silence. People who might now feel bold enough to speak. The battle wasn't over, but it was turning. And Denise Holloway was ready for what came next. The parking lot finally cleared as the last of the bystanders drifted away, but the energy lingered, like a pulse in the air. What had started as a routine afternoon had become something far greater. Denise stood beside James, watching the federal SUVs vanish down the road. Behind them, Marcus spoke quietly to Harold McCoy, the attorney. Brewer stood a few feet away, still gripping his hat, his eyes distant. James broke the silence first. "You handled that perfectly." Denise didn't answer right away. She was still watching Brewer. The young officer had aged years in a single afternoon. "He'll carry this for a long time," she said softly. James followed her gaze. He chose the right side. That's what matters. Before Denise could reply, Agent Carter returned, her tablet in hand. "Colonel, there's something you both need to see." She turned the screen toward them. Live newsfeed was already running. The footage of Denise's arrest, Cutler's aggression, Brewer's reluctant compliance, and the moment the federal agents arrived. The anchor's voice cut in over the video. "Outrage is growing tonight after video surfaced of a black woman, later identified as retired military attorney Colonel Denise Holloway, being unlawfully detained by police officers in a suburban plaza. The arresting officer, Brad Cutler, has a history of excessive force complaints. Federal authorities have launched a full investigation." James exhaled slowly. "That didn't take long." Carter nodded. "It's trending nationally now. And there's more." She tapped the screen. "Several other victims are coming forward. Complaints about Cutler and even other officers in the department. Cases that were dismissed or ignored. Your actions today have opened a door they thought was permanently shut." Denise shook her head slowly. "It's overwhelming." "It's progress," Carter corrected. "And with your permission, I'd like to set up a meeting with the Department of Justice Task Force tomorrow morning. We'll need your statement, of course, and possibly your involvement in coordinating community outreach." James chuckled, softly. "I told you, Denise. Once they saw your leadership today, they wouldn't let you walk away quietly." Denise smiled faintly. "I suppose not." Just then, Brewer approached, his expression torn between determination and fear. "Colonel Holloway, may I speak with you privately?" Denise nodded. "Of course." They stepped a few feet away. Brewer lowered his voice. "I know I did the right thing back there, but I need to be honest." Denise waited patiently. Brewer's shoulders sagged. Cutler isn't the only one. There are others on the force, officers who've crossed the line, some worse than him. I kept quiet because, well, I thought it was just how things worked. I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't want to be labeled a traitor. Denise placed a steady hand on his arm. "You're not a traitor. You're a truth teller. There's a big difference." Brewer nodded. "I want to come forward about everything. I'll testify. Whatever it takes." Agent Carter had joined them quietly. You're making the right decision, Officer Brewer. But it won't be easy. I don't care, Brewer said firmly. If I stay silent now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Denise smiled softly. Then we'll stand with you. Carter tapped her tablet. I'll set up a deposition for tomorrow. We'll start building the case, not just against Cutler, but against any officer who's violated the public's trust. Brewer exhaled in relief, though the weight of his choice still pressed down on him. At that moment, a black sedan pulled up quietly to the curb. A tall, distinguished black man stepped out, wearing a gray suit and dark sunglasses. Carter straightened, immediately. Deputy Director Hughes. James raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect to see you here. Hughes removed his glasses. Normally I stay behind the desk, but this situation warranted a personal touch. He turned to Denise. Colonel Holloway, your actions today didn't just protect yourself. You've exposed a much deeper problem in this department, and possibly others nearby. Denise nodded. I'm willing to assist in any way I can. Hughes smiled faintly. That's what I was hoping you'd say. He gestured toward Brewer. And you, Officer Brewer. Your cooperation will be critical. Whistleblowers like you are rare, Brewer nodded nervously. I understand. Hughes glanced back at Denise. We've already authorized the formation of a special task force, not just for this department, but to audit neighboring jurisdictions where similar complaints have surfaced. James crossed his arms. That's a big move. It's a necessary one, Hughes replied. And Colonel Holloway, we'd like you to be part of it, officially. Denise blinked. I thought I was just consulting. You were, until today. Hughes smiled. Now we'd like you to help lead it. James grinned. Told you. Denise shook her head, though a smile crept onto her face. I'll need to think about it. Take the night, Hughes said. We'll meet first thing tomorrow. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the now empty lot, Denise felt a strange calm settle over her. The fear and humiliation of the afternoon were gone, replaced by something far stronger. Purpose. Brewer stepped forward one last time. Colonel, thank you for everything. Denise squeezed his shoulder gently. Thank you, Officer Brewer. You made a choice today that many never find the courage to make. Marcus approached quietly. The videos passed 50,000 views. James chuckled. That was fast. It's only the beginning, Marcus said. People are sharing their own stories in the comments. This is bigger than just today. Denise nodded slowly. Yes, much bigger. Hughes checked his watch. We'll see you tomorrow, Colonel. With that, the deputy director returned to his car and drove off. Carter gave Denise a final nod. Get some rest. Tomorrow we change everything. As night fully embraced the town, James placed an arm around Denise's shoulders. You ready for this? Denise looked up at the dark sky, where the first stars had begun to appear. I've been ready for a long time. I just didn't know today would be the day it started. They stood together in the quiet parking lot, once the scene of injustice, now the birthplace of a movement. And Denise knew deep down there was no turning back. The real battle was only beginning. Morning came quickly. Denise hadn't slept much. The events of the previous day played over in her mind like a looped video. Cutler's rage, Brewer's choice, Marcus's courage, and the sudden swell of a community no longer willing to be silent. She dressed carefully, choosing a navy blazer and black slacks, professional, strong. She paused briefly at the mirror. The bruises from the handcuffs were faint but visible on her wrists. She didn't cover them. Let the marks be seen. Let them remind everyone how fragile dignity could be when power went unchecked. James was already waiting by the door, coffee in hand. You ready? Denise smiled faintly. As I'll ever be. They arrived at the federal office building downtown just before 9. A quiet determination filled the air. Protesters gathered across the street, holding signs that read, Justice for Denise, End Police Abuse, and Accountability Now. It wasn't just a local crowd anymore. People had come from neighboring towns. News crews were already broadcasting live. Agent Carter met them at the entrance. "Colonel Mr. Holloway, welcome." Denise nodded. "How many are here?" "We've got the DOJ Task Force, Deputy Director Hughes, Officer Brewer, and about a dozen community leaders who asked to sit in." Carter lowered her voice. "This is bigger than we expected. It's becoming a national case." James smiled. "Good." They passed through security and made their way to a large conference room. The walls were lined with screens displaying evidence, video clips, complaint, files, arrest reports, and maps highlighting areas of concern. Brewer was already seated at the long table, looking nervous but determined. He stood when Denise entered. "Morning, Colonel." "Good morning, Officer Brewer." Hughes entered, moments later, followed by several members of the Department of Justice. "Let's get started." Carter began the briefing. Yesterday's incident was the spark, but what we're looking at now is a pattern. Officer Cutler wasn't acting alone. We've identified at least 4 other officers with similar complaint histories, all previously dismissed or buried. The screens shifted to display names and faces. Denise recognized 2 of them immediately. She'd seen their faces patrolling the plaza before. One of them had even nodded at her once in passing, pretending to be courteous. Carter continued, "Our investigation will expand beyond Cutler, and with Officer Brewer's testimony, we have a solid starting point." Brewer cleared his throat. "I've compiled everything I know, incidents, names, even times when Cutler bragged about silencing complaints." The room grew quiet. Hughes nodded approvingly. "Your courage won't go unnoticed." Brewer looked down. "I just wish I'd spoken sooner." Denise leaned forward. "What matters is that you're speaking now." Carter tapped a few keys, bringing up a map. "But we have a more urgent problem. Word has spread quickly. Not just among the public, but within the department. Some of the officers we're investigating have already started scrubbing files, erasing evidence, and intimidating potential witnesses." James frowned. "They're covering their tracks." "Exactly," Carter confirmed. "We need to act before too much disappears." Hughes stood. "We're authorizing immediate audits of personnel records, arrest reports, and all body cam footage. Federal warrants are being processed as we speak, and we'll need to mobilize quickly." One of the DOJ attorneys spoke up. "Colonel Holloway, with your consent, we'd like to appoint you as community liaison and special consultant. You'll coordinate with local leaders and help ensure transparency throughout this process." Denise didn't hesitate. "I accept." Brewer let out a small breath of relief. Having Denise officially on the team meant the community would have a voice and a protector. Hughes nodded. "Good. Now, there's one more development." He gestured toward the door. It opened, and Marcus entered, accompanied by Harold McCoy. The young man looked nervous but determined, holding his phone tightly in one hand. "I have more," Marcus said. "After the video went viral, people started sending me their own recordings, things they'd captured but were too afraid to release before. I've got footage of 2 other officers roughing up teenagers behind the mall, and a woman who says she was pulled over and harassed by Cutler's partner last month." Harold added, "We also have several sworn affidavits from families willing to testify." The room seemed to hold its breath. Carter smiled. "Well done." Marcus looked at Denise. "I want to help however I can." Denise stood and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You already have. But this will get harder, before it gets easier. Are you ready for that?" Marcus nodded firmly. "Yes, ma'am." Hughes turned back to the task force. "Then let's move. We execute the warrants immediately. Arrests will follow by the end of the day." Brewer asked quietly, "What about me?" Carter smiled. "You'll be leading the charge. You've earned it." The room broke into action. Agents filed out. Phones rang and plans were set into motion. Denise felt the momentum building, not just in the room, but in the community beyond these walls. As the task force mobilized, Denise, James, Marcus, and Brewer stepped out onto the front steps of the federal building. The crowd across the street spotted them and erupted into applause. Denise raised her hand. signaling for quiet. Reporters pressed forward, cameras rolling. "I'm not here today as a victim," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I'm here as a representative of every person who's ever been silenced or mistreated. We will no longer accept abuse disguised as law enforcement. We will no longer allow good officers to be punished for telling the truth. Today is not just about me. It's about all of us." The applause surged again. James leaned in, whispering, "You were born for this moment." Denise smiled. "Maybe so." Marcus added, "We've got more videos coming in by the hour. People are ready to speak." Denise looked out over the crowd, seeing not just faces but voices, stories, truths that had been hidden too long. "Then we'll listen," she said, "and we'll act." As the morning sun rose higher, shining brightly over the crowd, it was clear to everyone watching. This wasn't just a response to one incident. It was the beginning of a movement, and Denise Holloway was ready to lead. By midday, the task force was fully mobilized. What had started as a local controversy had become a sweeping investigation, pulling in federal agents, local reform groups, and a growing number of witnesses. Denise stood at the center of it all. She hadn't asked for this role, but she wasn't backing away from it either. She had accepted the weight, and now she would carry it forward. Inside the federal building, a large operations room buzzed with activity. Screens lit up with arrest records, body cam reviews, and live reports from teams in the field. Agent Carter walked briskly to Denise's side. "First warrant executed. Sergeant Wilkins arrested at his home an hour ago." Wilkins, one of Cutler's known allies. His file was thick with dismissed complaints. James stood nearby, arms crossed. "That's one. And 2 more are underway," Carter continued. "Officers Mathers and Reyes, both implicated by Marcus's video submissions and Brewer's testimony." Denise nodded. "What about retaliation threats? Are our witnesses safe?" Carter pointed to the board. "We've assigned protection details to Marcus, Harold McCoy, Brewer, and the families who came forward." Denise felt a wave of relief. This wasn't just about arrests. It was about keeping people safe long enough for the truth to reshape the system. Brewer entered the room, a folder clutched in his hand. His eyes were bloodshot, but his expression was focused. "We have a problem." Denise motioned him over. "What is it?" Brewer laid the folder on the table. "I found evidence that some officers inside the department are trying to leak information. Names of whistleblowers. Yours, mine, Marcus's. They've been passing details to a local militia group." A chill ran down Denise's spine. Militia. James's jaw tightened. That escalates things. Carter immediately picked up her phone. "We'll get Homeland Security involved. If this goes from police misconduct to organized threats, we'll need counter-terror units on standby." Denise shook her head. "No, not yet. We can't make this look like a government overreach. That's exactly what they want. It'll drive public sympathy toward the bad actors." Brewer frowned. "Then what do we do?" Denise looked at the evidence again. The names. The risks, the stakes. She took a deep breath. "We expose them. All of them. Full transparency. We won't let them operate in the shadows." Carter nodded. "I'll prepare a press release." "No." Denise stopped her gently. "Not just a release. A press conference today. We tell the public exactly what's happening. We won't hide behind legal jargon. We'll stand in the light." James grinned faintly. "That's the Denise I know." Carter smiled. "I'll notify the media." An hour later, they stood at a podium outside the federal building. Cameras rolled. Reporters crowded forward. The protest signs from the morning had multiplied. Now there were dozens, maybe hundreds of people gathered. Denise stepped up to the microphone, the afternoon sun warm on her face. "Good afternoon. As many of you know, yesterday's incident involving Officer Brad Cutler was not an isolated event. It was a symptom of a deeper problem. And thanks to brave individuals, Officer Kyle Brewer, Mr. Marcus Bennett, and Attorney Harold McCoy, those problems are now coming to light." She paused, letting the gravity settle. Today, federal agents executed warrants against multiple officers accused of misconduct, abuse of power, and obstruction of justice. But we've also uncovered a new threat, an attempt to intimidate witnesses and silence the truth by collaborating with an extremist militia group. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed wildly. Denise continued. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. Every person who speaks the truth deserves protection, not persecution. And I stand here today to tell you, we will protect them. Applause rippled through the crowd. James watched proudly from the side. Carter gave a subtle nod of approval. Reporters shouted questions. Colonel Holloway, will more arrests be made? Is the police chief involved? What about community oversight? Denise raised her hand for quiet. Yes, more arrests are coming. Yes, we are investigating the entire command structure. And yes, we are forming a civilian oversight committee starting today. Citizens will have a seat at the table moving forward. The applause swelled louder this time, but as the press conference continued, a figure at the back of the crowd caught Denise's eye. A man, tall, wearing a hoodie despite the warm weather, his face partially hidden. Something about him set off every instinct she'd honed in the military. She leaned toward Carter. Security detail. Who's monitoring the crowd? Carter spoke into her radio. Unit 3, eyes on suspicious male, back row, gray hoodie. Seconds later, 2 plainclothes agents moved in. But by the time they reached the spot, the man was gone. Carter frowned. He disappeared. James stepped closer to Denise. Do you think? I don't think, Denise whispered. I know they're watching and they won't stop until they're forced to. Carter spoke quietly. We'll review footage, track him down. Denise nodded but kept her composure as the reporters pressed forward again. This fight won't be easy, she told the crowd. But nothing worth changing ever is. We'll meet resistance. We'll face threats. But we will not stop. Not until every officer who abused their badge is held accountable. The applause was thunderous now. Marcus stood at the front of the crowd, filming. Brewer stood beside him, no longer looking like the uncertain rookie from yesterday. Today, he looked like an officer determined to rebuild what others had tried to destroy. As the press conference ended, Denise stepped back from the podium. Carter leaned in. We'll increase protection detail immediately. Denise nodded. Do it. And tell Homeland Security they might be needed after all. James placed a hand on her back. They're scared. That's why they're watching. Good, Denise replied. Let them be scared, because the truth isn't going away. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the courthouse steps, Denise knew this battle had grown far beyond her. It had become a test of the community's will, and of her own. And she was ready. The next 48 hours moved. Fast. Too fast. Denise barely slept. The investigation expanded at a pace even the task force hadn't expected. As more victims came forward, the web of corruption inside the department unraveled thread by thread. 4 officers arrested, 2 more placed under suspension, and a list of possible accomplices growing by the hour. Denise found herself at the center of press briefings, strategy meetings, and quiet late-night calls with scared families willing to testify. She could feel the momentum building, but she also felt the danger creeping closer. By Thursday morning, Homeland Security had confirmed what they all feared. The militia group wasn't just making threats. They were planning action. Agent Carter met with Denise in the operations room, a grim expression shadowing her face. We intercepted a message late last night. The group intends to send a message before the weekend. And you, Colonel Holloway, are their target. James tightened his jaw but didn't speak. He knew better than to argue. Denise had already refused the idea of stepping back. She wouldn't hide now. Not when the people who trusted her were still risking everything. I won't leave the community exposed, Denise said firmly. If I step aside, they'll just pick another target. This ends now. Carter nodded. Then we push forward with the arrests today. The plan was aggressive but necessary. All remaining suspects, including higher-ranking officials suspected of protecting Cutler and his allies, would be taken into custody before nightfall. No more delays, no more chances for them to cover their tracks, or worse. Brewer arrived minutes later, now wearing plain clothes for safety. I've confirmed 2 supervisors tried to destroy records last night. The warrant team is ready. Marcus joined them as well, clutching his phone. More video submissions. People are sending in years' worth of clips. Some of these officers were violent long before Cutler ever got promoted. Denise smiled at him. Your courage has inspired others. Marcus shrugged, but his eyes held pride. I just hit record. Sometimes, Denise replied. That's all it takes to change history. By early afternoon, the teams were in motion. Arrests rolled out across the town, at homes, at stations, even at a few so-called safe houses where bad actors thought they could lay low. By 3, 5 more officers were in federal custody. 2 supervisors were detained, and a third, Captain Elias Monroe, the highest-ranking suspect, remained at large. Denise reviewed the reports with Carter. Monroe's not the type to run, she said. If he's gone dark, it means he's planning something. Carter nodded. We've put out a bolo. Every available agent is on alert. Just as she spoke, Denise's phone buzzed. A restricted number. She answered cautiously. A voice, cold and calm, spoke. Congratulations, Colonel Holloway. You've made quite a name for yourself. Denise stiffened. Captain Monroe. Carter leaned in, eyes wide. You think this ends with a few arrests? Monroe continued. You've humiliated my department, my brothers. You've made enemies you can't even see, but you'll feel them soon enough. Denise's voice didn't waver. Your so-called brothers violated the law. You'll answer for it. I won't be standing trial, Colonel, Monroe said darkly. You will. The line went dead. Carter snapped into action. Trace that call now. Technicians scrambled. Within minutes, the signal was traced, not to a private residence, but to the roof of a parking garage 3 blocks away. Move, Carter ordered. Denise, Carter, Brewer, and a tactical team rushed toward the location. Helicopters circled overhead. Sirens echoed in the distance. The city was no longer just watching events unfold. It was holding its breath. They reached the garage within minutes. Officers fanned out, weapons ready. Carter spoke into her radio. We have visual on the suspect's vehicle. It was a black SUV parked near the edge of the roof, but no sign of Monroe. Denise moved cautiously, her instincts sharp. She scanned the area. Shadows stretched long across the concrete as the sun dipped lower. And then she saw him. Monroe stood near the ledge, dressed in tactical gear, a rifle slung across his chest. But he wasn't aiming at anyone below. He was facing them, waiting. Captain Monroe, Carter called out, her weapon raised. This is over. Drop your weapon. Monroe shook his head slowly. No, this is where it begins. Brewer stepped forward. Sir, don't do this. It's not too late to surrender. Monroe laughed bitterly. You still think there's justice in this system? The same system that protected us for years, then turned on us the moment some civilians cried on camera? Denise stepped into view, hands raised. This isn't about protecting a broken system. It's about fixing it. You can still face the consequences the right way. Monroe's eyes darkened. There is no right way for men like me. Only war. He raised the rifle, not at the agents but toward the crowd gathered below. Protesters, reporters, families. Denise reacted instantly. He's targeting the civilians. Before Monroe could fire, a shot rang out. Not from his rifle, but from an agent positioned to the left. A single, precise bullet struck Monroe in the shoulder, spinning him backward. His rifle clattered. To the ground. He staggered, tried to recover, but Carter's team swarmed him within seconds. Monroe was forced to his knees, arms wrenched behind his back. It's over, Carter said, breathless. Denise stepped closer, staring down at the man who had threatened so many lives. No more running, no more hiding. You'll answer for all of it. Monroe looked up, blood seeping from his wound. You think taking me down will stop this? There are more. There will always be more. Denise shook her head. Maybe, but we'll face them, and they'll fall just like you. Brewer lowered, his weapon trembling slightly. He was willing to kill civilians just to make a point. That's what cowards do, James said, arriving at Denise's side. But today, he failed. The tactical team secured Monroe and led him away. Helicopters hovered overhead as the news spread across the airwaves. Captain Elias Monroe, the last pillar of the corrupt network, was in custody. The crowd below erupted in cheers as word reached them. Denise felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The battle had been long, painful, dangerous, but they had broken the circle of silence, and as the sun began to set, casting golden light across the rooftops, she knew the hardest part was finally over. Justice had arrived. The next morning dawned clear and cool. The sky a brilliant blue stretched over a town forever changed. It had taken weeks, interviews, court motions, depositions, but the foundation that once protected the corrupt officers was gone. The arrests of Cutler, Monroe, and their allies had triggered a complete overhaul of the police department. The state's Attorney General announced a full external audit. Federal oversight wasn't temporary, it was permanent now. But today wasn't about paperwork or press releases. Today was about community, about recognition, about honoring the people who had stood up, spoken out, and refused to let fear silence them. At the town's civic plaza, a makeshift stage had been set up. Hundreds gathered, families, reporters, church groups, veterans, and young activists alike. Some had been here the day Denise was arrested. Others had joined the movement after, seeing the footage online. Denise stood backstage, looking out over the sea of faces. She took a deep breath. James stood beside her, one arm protectively around her shoulders. "You ready?" he asked gently. She smiled. "More than ready." Agent Carter approached. "The DOJ and Homeland are watching the live stream. The new police chief is here too. They'll be swearing in the Civilian Oversight Board after your speech." Denise nodded. "Good. They should hear this as much as anyone." Brewer stood, a few steps away, no longer in uniform. His future in law enforcement remained uncertain, but his role in the investigation had earned him respect and gratitude. He had chosen the harder path, and Denise knew that mattered far more than a badge. Marcus adjusted his camera tripod, recording the event for his growing social media following. His quiet courage had become the spark for countless others to come forward. In the front row sat Alice, Denise's elderly friend. Her wheelchair had been decorated with a small banner. "We stand together." The mayor stepped up to the podium first, offering a brief introduction. His words were diplomatic, cautious. He spoke of reform, accountability, and a new chapter for the community. But when he finished and Denise stepped forward, the applause was thunderous. She took her place behind the microphone. The crowd fell silent. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady. "Not long ago, I stood in a different place, cuffed, humiliated, accused of crimes I didn't commit. I was targeted not because I broke the law, but because I challenged the comfort of those who had abused their power for too long." She paused, letting the memory settle. But what happened next wasn't about me alone. It was about every person who stood up when they could have stayed silent. Officer Brewer, who chose integrity over loyalty to corruption. Marcus Bennett, who recorded the truth when others looked away. Attorney Harold McCoy, who refused to stop fighting for families ignored by the system. And all of you. The crowd stirred. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others held up signs. "Truth wins. Justice for all. Never again." Denise continued. "We exposed a network of officers who treated the law like a shield for their abuses. We held them accountable. And now, we have built something stronger. A community oversight board. Civilian voices will now shape how this town is protected." She gestured to a group seated on the stage. Teachers, church leaders, veterans, students, the newly appointed oversight board. "Change doesn't come from hope alone," Denise said. "It comes from action, from standing up even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous." She looked directly at Marcus. "You taught us that a single voice can carry farther than anyone imagines." The crowd erupted in applause again. Brewer wiped at his eyes. Denise continued. Some say, "This victory is the end." It isn't. This is only the beginning. We must remain vigilant. We must support the good officers who protect and serve with honor. And we must confront those who betray the badge, no matter how high they rise. Her voice grew stronger. Captain, Monroe thought he could destroy this movement with threats, with violence. But the community stood stronger. Fear did not break us. It made us bolder. The crowd roared in agreement. James stepped up beside her, offering a small nod. Denise smiled back but kept her focus on the people. To the families who came forward despite threats. To the protesters who marched for change. To every citizen who recorded injustice instead of looking away. You have built something no one can take from you. Power, rooted in truth. The mayor returned to the stage, this time with a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a silver medallion engraved with the words, "Courage, Honor, Justice." "Colonel Denise Holloway," he announced, "on behalf of this community, we present this award in recognition of your service, your sacrifice, and your leadership." The applause was deafening. Denise accepted the medallion but held it up. "This belongs to all of us." The crowd chanted in unison, "Justice for all, justice for all." As the chants faded, the new police chief, a woman of integrity with a long history of community engagement, stepped forward. She raised her right hand and recited the oath of office, followed by each member of the Civilian Oversight Board. Accountability had become more than a demand. It was now law. After the ceremony, Denise stepped down from the stage and into the crowd. She embraced Alice, shook hands with families who had once feared speaking out, thanked officers who had upheld their oaths. Brewer approached quietly. "I'm not sure where my career goes from here, but I know where my conscience is." Denise smiled. "That's more important than any title." Marcus joined them. "We have thousands watching the live stream, people from other towns, other states. They want to know how to build what we built here. Then we'll help them," Denise replied. "This is just the start." As the afternoon sun bathed the plaza in golden light, Denise felt the bruises on her wrists fade into memory. What remained was resilience, purpose, and the knowledge that when good people refused to stay silent, real change was not only possible, it was unstoppable. James leaned in. "You ready to go home?" Denise smiled. "Not yet. There's work to do." And as the crowd gathered closer, united not by fear but by hope, Denise knew the battle they had fought wasn't just for justice. It was for the future. A future they would shape together. What happened to Denise Holloway was more than just an act of injustice. It was a reminder that abuse of power can happen anywhere, even in quiet neighborhoods and small towns. But it also showed us something even more important. When one person stands up, it can inspire a ripple effect. Denise's courage encouraged Officer Brewer to speak out. Marcus's determination gave others the bravery to share their stories. And the community's unity led to real change. The lessons here are clear. Silence protects corruption. Speaking up challenges it. No matter our age, background, or past experiences, we all have a role to play. Whether it's recording what others fear to see, telling the truth when it's uncomfortable, or supporting those who step forward. We can all be part of the solution. Our viewers, especially those who have lived through decades of challenges and victories, you know better than anyone that real change requires persistence, sacrifice, and unity. Let this story be a reminder that it's never too late to make a difference. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of courage, truth, and community, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others who need to hear this message, and subscribe for more real stories that inspire action and hope. Your voice matters. Your choices matter. Together, we can continue to stand up for what's right. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are never powerless when you stand for justice.